Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm your co-host, Hugh.
And I'm your other co-host, Dev. And on today's show, we are going to be looking at minute 64, in which Martin prepares himself for this high school reunion ordeal he's about to go through. Debbie is sat waiting for him, and Martin takes a quick break to call Dr. Oatman.
Okay, and joining us on today's show, as she has been with us all week, Dr. Rayna Denison. Hey, Rayna.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Hi.
Welcome
Good to
back.
have you. Indeed. So let's talk about the fact that you, Rayna, said to us that this particular moment in the film stylistically appeals to you a great deal. Now, we haven't talked all about style. We've talked a lot about dialogue, construction, editing in the last few episodes. So talk to us about style, please.
Well, in this 5-minute sequence, it's one of my two favorite things. My first, as you know, from previous episodes, was the use of bricks and the amount of bricks that we saw in the diner scene. But what I really enjoy about this moment is you have at the beginning of this minute a mirror shot. So we have John Cusack's character Martin Blank talking to himself in the mirror, prepping for the reunion at the high school. And as we do so, we have a wonderful kind of achingly slow, very slow kind of zoom in to his character in the mirror image. So it kind of pushes his real self out of the way. So the camera's only looking at his mirror image. And that, I think, gives the little monologue he's doing an interesting flavor, shall we say.
I like that. Because the guy in the mirror looks like the Cusack of the 80s.
Yes, doesn't he, though?
He looks young, slick back hair, clean
like
shaven.
He's going to prom.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And he's smiling. We haven't seen him smile in a while. Like, genuinely, not like cynically. And there's there's a window you can see daylight, even though it's an interior scene that looks almost night lit, you know?
He's well lit. I mean, how many times have we said in this film that he exists in shadows and he's actually well lit in this moment?
Yeah. That's
very
amazing.
Romantic lighting as well. It's lovely kind of high key lighting. Yeah.
So here's something interesting about American film of this period, right? A lot of critics, particularly in Europe, have often complained about an influence that starts with, funnily enough, the Scott brothers, and then it's a British influence brought into America, and then everyone else does it, of having indoor scenes with lots of lighting indoors. So you got lampshades and uplighting on the walls and stuff, and then it's daylight outside still, and there's blinds pulled, right? And Tony Scott was famous for this. And I cannot remember where I was in America where I suddenly realized that's actually what happens because of the way buildings are built. Like, sometimes you're in a room, and because there's another building so close outside, the natural light is barely getting in. And actually, I don't think it's just the cinematographers and the directors going, oh, this is how we want it to look. I think that a lot of critics outside of America don't understand that actually this is partially sometimes just how it is. If you want to be able to see yourself in the mirror in the hotel room, you have to have the light on, because the daylight from the window is not enough.
Right.
And if you look at sorry.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, if you look at the background in this scene, the room itself is painted very dark. It's got quite dark ceiling, dark surrounds. So it makes sense that the light would look a little unnatural, but it is beautifully rich in that sequence.
Yeah. And it is, it's a big room, it's a dark room, it's a small window. It's actually quite far away, as we see when we go to the reverse angle. It's hard to tell in the mirror. And actually the main source of light is quite clearly coming from the opposite direction, which I mean, if we were being fully realistic about it, is never going to happen, because a mirror like that would almost certainly have the surround lights for allowing you to do your makeup and so on. If there was going to be lights there at all, having that strong light from what is presumably probably just a wall doesn't really work. But for framing the face, for giving that maybe an implication of that bipolarness, having very heavily in light one side and quite heavily in shadow the other, with just the faintest outside light to kind of give you the outline of the outside of the face, it is gorgeous to look at, and it works really well for him putting on this persona that he's expecting to run whilst he's at the thing. I particularly enjoy the thought of going to a high school reunion with a guy that leads a weekends men group that specializes in ritual killings. That's
But again, we are right back to what was happening in the 1980s in America, where you had the satanic panic going on.
God,
and
yes.
so ritual killings at the weekend
Yeah.
would have been topical at the time as well.
Yeah.
So it's again, this stuff just it's a paean to what was happening in
even
America.
the other jobs that he cites, right? He starts off with Pet Psychiatrist. That was never going to have been a thing before the 90s, right? He moves to couch insurance, which is no longer a thing in the 90s, right? That was the thing that you did when you were, leased to buy furniture, right?
Right.
And then and then he's straight back to the modernity with test market positive thinking. What is that? Does anybody know? Even this day and age, I mean, it seems to have taken over, but does it really achieve anything?
No.
He's citing all of these things of like what the world is now, what it could have been, as he's trying to find the fit for his persona that's going to work in the environment he's going into.
And of course, the point of it is that none of them are. They're all a reflection. They're all just a mirror to who he really is. I think the space between his real self and the mirror self is interesting as well, because he then starts, he kind of goes from being very focused in that monologue to almost manically moving around the room, in big exaggerated movements, grabbing the phone and carrying it round, and that kind of controlled performance of the monologue into the mirror is a really big contrast to what happens afterwards when we're back to his real self, unstable, not knowing who he is. So I love this scene.
Yeah. And he has that focus, right? He's still got the nervous tics. You can see the adrenaline coursing, right? Like the ums and the ahs and the kind of the much faster pace of dialogue than he usually comes out. But he has the focus. So he's focused on something so he can do it. And that's what makes him supposedly so good at his job. Although, as we discussed yesterday, maybe he's not actually that good at his job because he keeps failing. But, I definitely feel it. And it's hard for us to compare this with the previous minute because we've kind of shifted over a day and it's now a different episode. But he has also, not only is he about to go to that frantic energy of running around the room whilst talking to Oatman, he's just come from that frantic phone call needing to be talked down a little by Marcella. And then there's just this moment of relative calm because he's got a focal point. And then we're back to the frantic energy.
And we also have this thing that we've mentioned before about the technology of the era, whereby you start to get plot devices. So, he's able to just cut the phone call short because the batteries are running low on this thing. This that is probably one of the first times I can remember hearing that. Like, this is now so, instead of the whole, can't hear you, it's now like, oh, battery closed, done, and move on. But yeah, you guys are absolutely right on the whole thing, the way it works out. Because we've seen him do the walking around, talking on the phone thing. We've seen that side of him. The guy in the mirror, that's new. That's news for us. That's totally different. Very.
And I think the fact that he wants to move away from the headset, which he always wore when on the phone with Marcella in previous scenes where he was doing his work as a hitman, I think that shows us, again, another subtle-ish kind of shift away from who he used to be back to, or who he has been back to who he wants to be.
Yeah.
And that in its own right is an interesting break. Like, we get the break between his escape from the diner to into this room, but it's a series of shifts that we get here.
And it is sort of taking us. I mean, this is the thing about the film, is this film moves so interestingly between genres, and how we get from genre to genre is in itself really interesting. And that's what we're doing here, isn't it? We're physically, as well as verbally, as well as, in every sense, this film is moving itself away from the nastiness of what's just happened into a different space, a rom-com space. It still intrigues me that to this day, the front cover on any version of this film and the posters of this film make it look like a rom-com, right?
Yes.
right? Like that's how they sold it. Even though the trailer had all the action in it, like pretty much every action beat is in the trailer. But they
Slightly
always pushed us.
controversial take, but I've never liked the movie poster or the cover art.
Oh
of
no,
this
it's awful.
film.
The
And
colors on it are
I've
horrible.
seen so many people like rave about it online because I think it.
Oh,
I mean, it references, album covers of the 80s. It's got like that kind of rom-com element as well. But I feel like it does the film a disservice because it
Agreed.
it's not original. It's not eye-catching. It just is, right? It looks like it could be Sliding Doors, or it could be any one of another of like, kind of films of this time, and it has nothing that pulls it apart from that.
I mean,
I just wanted to say a little aside, a little moment. I do love that when we cut away to Minnie Driver in the bedroom, we have the Clash poster on the wall.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe Strummer's presence couldn't be any more obvious in this movie.
Yeah, you've taken the character in that frame and you've just shunted them to one side so you can feature a Clash poster as well.
I mean, this is part of the fun of it, of like being you just know how personal this film is, right?
Yeah.
This is so his first production. You just know it. It's like all the things that he managed to tick off in one go. It's really impressive. And yeah, he had to have the Clash, and then wow, he got Strummer involved as well. It just couldn't get any better, That's so cool.
And then, of course, we have another cut away from him, from Martin Blank in the room to his psychiatrist, which is for another wonderful conversation.
I mean, just the idea. I keep wondering if that's what inspired him to think maybe he could do pet psychiatry. Was he thinking, yeah, could I just mimic my guy and then I'll be fine? I'll just claim I do it for pets, But yeah, it's just, oh dear. Is it me, by the way, or is there something about? I don't know. I keep looking. I mean, maybe I've just been doing this podcast too long, but we've been looking at Cusack's face for so much time now, and I keep thinking to myself about because I've seen him recently. He keeps turning up lately for various little bits of PR here and there for things.
Yeah,
and
he's doing a lot of activism work
as well,
things and political work. Yeah,
and I think he's done some voiceovers for some cartoons or something. But the thing is that he's one of those guys who still looks, he's pretty much the same. He's a bit more lined, but he doesn't have, deep crevices in the face, and it's not like, do you know what I mean? It's not like I presume he's got some gray. I mean, there's some gray in his hair. I mean, I don't know if he dies or not. It's guys, Hollywood, who knows? But the thing is that he seems to be, one of the things I always found interesting about him is there is a sense in this film that he's slightly at ill ease, or maybe, I mean, it's partly playing blank, but I also get the impression that there's a degree of ill ease with the person, the character, the public persona that he became associated with through the rom-coms. I feel like there's a sort of semi-deliberate destruction of that here. Like this scene is his talking to me. This is his Taxi Driver moment, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. This is him looking in the mirror, and what we see in the mirror is what we think of John Cusack at the time we're watching
exactly.
this, right? Which is actually John Cusack of like 5 to 10 years earlier, right? This is not Con Air John Cusack. It's not John Cusack in the rest of this movie. And what he's saying in this, it's this, all of that was a persona. And this movie is much more who I really am. What you're seeing in the mirror is the guy that sells couch insurance and is a pet psychiatrist and is all of these things that he clearly isn't, right? And then you cut away and you actually, he's back to kind of being in the shadows and looking like his usual self, albeit frantic, but much more the guy that he is now. And I think that was that kind of cut from Hughes-esque rom-com Cusack to more action-minded Con Air, Grosse Pointe Cusack.
And then, when we cut back from Debi, and I want, there's always something to say about, the framing of Minnie Driver in this film, because this film goes out of its way, rom-com style, to make sure she looks spectacular, but also it goes out of its way to make sure that she doesn't look like your typical Hollywood rom-com actress, because she's not. She's relatively new to America at this point, not completely, but to some degree, and she's yet to kind of have a kind of public persona in the way Cusack does. If anything, I think this film helps form that. But when we cut back to him talking on the phone still to Oatman, the psychiatrist, although Oatman's actually not listening to him in terms of he's letting it go to voicemail, so to speak, to use modern parlance. But Cusack's manic behavior once again includes him physically. The bit where he jumps on the two arms of the sofa of the armchair by the window and crouches like he's some sort of animal, poised, right? Like, it's so freaky, it's so weird, and I wonder how many takes they did before he must have fallen off. Like seriously, he just does it, boom, single take, boom, and he's right there, and it's all in that one take, and I'm like, dude, how did you do that without falling off? What does that say about your character? What does it say about you? Like, it's so weird and it's such a huge contrast to what's just happened, and it's almost like it's almost like Debbie waiting in the window ends all of that. And it's also that reminder of what happened before, because she looks nervous.
She's kind of clicking her fingers, so she's got that nervous energy as well. They both are. They're both nervous in this moment.
She remembers what happened last time.
Mm-hmm.
I was just rewatching that jump on the arm of the armchair. That may not be Cusack.
What? I'm going to watch it again.
What, stunt double?
It's very cleverly cut, and I think it actually is Cusack, and it's a shame that they don't really capture his face in the same
Let's have a look.
Angle. But
I see what you mean.
It's seamless. It's almost perfect.
No, I see what you mean. It's almost like it's a second unit shot. Like, the guy isn't necessarily him, and then we only see it when they cut to the close up, and he turns back from the window.
Correct.
Wow, good spot.
It's so hard to say because it is shot from the back.
Yeah, and because
it's shot from the back, it's almost impossible to know, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if it was a stunt double, it was beautifully done, and if it wasn't, it's kind of a shame. Because it would have just been nice to actually just frame that as it really is John doing this. But
again,
but I have to say, when I went back and watched, I was quite impressed by how much of his stunt work he does himself in this movie.
Oh yeah.
So he's doing his kickboxing at this point because he's a 6th Dan black belt in kickboxing or whatever it is.
Oh wow.
So he's been doing, I think, kickboxing for like 20 years or something.
Wow. So no wonder he knew who Benny.
So no wonder those. But if you watch, he is doing those head high kicks.
Yeah.
In some of the fights, and that was why I went and had a look and read up about his martial arts background. But again, kickboxing rather than an Asian martial art. But I think it's an interesting kind of physicality that he brings to the role that I hadn't associated with him before this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, even in Con Air, he doesn't really get to chase it.
And I think you guys are right. I think this is exactly why. This is the first production out of his. His production shingle is this is the showcase of everything he can do.
Yeah.
And actually, it shouldn't surprise me, should it? Because it's like kickboxing was so fashionable once you had Van Damme, and you had and of course Benny Urquidez was world kickboxing champion, and so if you were watching Hong Kong, you understood that the guys who did kung fu then also moved into kickboxing as well to get a sharper style that could be more friendly to Western filmmaking. Yeah. I mean, and then there was almost like it was almost a production line of kickboxers going from the ring to film post Van Damme, even if all they're doing is being the bad guy. But the point is, it becomes a thing in the 90s. Just about every kickboxer ends up with at least one film with their name attached to it. And well, it's not just the 90s, that carries on
Oh,
to
it goes in
today.
cycles, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You get the martial artists, then you get the boxers, then you get the martial artists, then you get the kickboxers, then you get the MMA guys coming in soon after this.
Yeah. And again, that comes back to what we were saying in previous episodes about whether a film like this would ever get made again. You know, I think the closest I've seen to something like this has been the Scott Adkins films for Netflix, The Debt Collector. They've done 2 films so far in the series, and it's very much, they're much more brutal, they're much less sophisticated, but they are the only things I can think of that have a certain blend of humor, parody, or at least some satire of the genre, and the action. Because Adkins, obviously, you know, kickboxing champ, amazing actor, physical actor, and then Costas Mandylor plays his partner. They basically play 2 guys who, Mandylor is a debt collector for mobs and local bad guys, and Adkins is a down on his luck ex-military guy who gets dragged into being one. He gets trained up as it, and it's just them wandering around LA punching people. That's basically what it is. It's very Bud Spencer and Terrence Hill in places, until it gets to the end when it gets very Pulp Fiction, and you're like, oh, this is what you guys were trying to do. But I don't think but again, this is the problem. This balance that Armitage brings to Grosse Pointe Blank, the tonal balance, nobody's doing anything like this. I just can't think of a film like this right now from anybody anywhere in the world. Not the French, not the Chinese, nobody.
When was Taxi made?
Late 90s.
So I think that comes pretty close. It's the action, it's the comedy, it's the romance.
But again, 90s.
Yeah.
This is a thing that the 90s really did well, and it feels like nobody would believe it, I guess, maybe. I don't know. I might have to ask the children I teach. They're young enough to kind of be like, you know, like to them, everything's new right now. And that's kind of entertaining because you kind of get a sense of perspective on what still works in certain things and what doesn't.
And again, I would say probably think about television as a place some of these things have gone to. So we had all those long-running shows, things like Burn Notice and...
Oh, I miss Burn Notice.
Even CSI, NCIS shows have some elements of this.
Yeah, that's true. And as you said in the previous episode, Rayna, this does go in cycles with television as well. I mean, right now, I think it's probably fair to say that if you want to see good, well-made American action, you watch Amazon TV series, you watch Reacher, you watch Jack Ryan. You know, if you and if you want to see good, well-made 90s style kung fu, you watch Netflix with, you know, what we were talking about with
The Brother's Son.
You know, that is about as 90s as you can get, really.
Or the new Avatar: The Last Airbender,
which I haven't seen yet.
Came out.
Trailer looks good. I said trailer. I don't know about the.
I've watched the first episode.
Oh, okay.
It was slow, shall we say?
Is it better than the
and a lot
Shyamalan?
of CGI.
Okay.
There was a lot of CGI. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so it's not going to be One Piece.
At the end of this minute, we get to the start of his conversation with Oatman. I feel like we should hold that excitement off for tomorrow and wrap this minute up. So this was minute 64 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, myself, Dev Sodiger, and Hugh David.
Today's guest and our guest all this week has been Dr. Rayna Denison. Rayna, where can people find you online?
Oh, thanks for asking, and thanks for having me. I'm at the University of Bristol. They can find me on the website there very easily.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. You can find us wherever you find good podcasts, including the player you're listening to us on now, or if you're watching us on YouTube itself. We're also on X and Spotify at Debi Radio, DEBI Radio. And we have a website if you want to check that out. Come and visit debiradio.com. And once again, that's DEBI Radio.
And you can talk with us on the Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling.